Get on the train before it leaves the station. The truth train is coming, gonna run them down, run them down.
Hey there, everybody. How you doing? Okay, so we're here today taking a look at Netflix's new series, Exhibit A, Episode 4, where it takes a look at how sometimes DNA can become junk science. If it's, if certain things are done inappropriately, it can very easily become junk science, and that's what this episode kind of goes over. It also goes over a bigger problem with corruption in New York City. Huge corruption there, and it's left kind of unredressed at the end of this here. So that's going to be something that this Netflix series and this particular episode is going to fuel, probably that cause there to get Taj some kind of justice in this. So for those of you who don't know who Taj is the gentleman who kind of, this whole thing was set in motion because one night he was out with one of his friends, a girlfriend of his, and he's actually a homosexual gentleman, but he was out with a friend of his. He was riding home in a car with a friend of that friend. Apparently they had a difference of opinion or whatever. He offended the person driving, and the person driving pulled over and put him out onto the street. He was on the street in this Hasidic Jewish neighborhood, where essentially they have this the best way I can describe it is like neighborhood watch on steroids, like beyond on steroids, yeah. They're really conscientious. They actually have like a force of people that carry around little walkie-talkies. They're they're serious about it, right? They're kind of, right? They even have relationship with NYPD. You see a lot of their leaders of the showroom in a lot of pictures at dinners and things like that with NYPD and stuff like that. So you see that a lot in this show. So there's that, right? You see a close affinity between this showroom, right, and the NYPD. So what happens this night is Taj Patterson is trying to just walk home. He's walking down the streets, trying to walk home and everything. And suddenly he hears something from behind him that didn't sound good, right? So he kind of turns and looks and sees that he has three somewhat large gentlemen following him. So he eventually begins to run. And he begins to run, and then they start calling in, and people, literally cars start stopping in the street to try to go in front of Taj and block him, and whatever, and people are getting out of cars trying to help the showroom, other showroom members and stuff like this, and until eventually there's just this mob of 20 or 25 Jewish guys just pummeling this poor guy, Taj. They're just, and eventually the ringleader of it, who's basically gotten away scot-free on all this, Joel Ixkovic, I believe it is, or anyway, he's the brother of the guy who's the leader of the showroom or the head of the showroom or whatever, and so he's high up, he's got clout, right? And he actually went. This is what Taj said he remembers as he was passing out, is that this particular guy with the glasses and with the showroom symbol on his jacket and all that, which is a pretty good description of this guy, but he was pushing in Taj's eyeballs. Well, when Taj woke up in the hospital, his right eyeball, the socket was broken. The guy's nail must have gotten a little bit through the open eye because the retina was torn. And now he has no vision in that eye, right? And that's what happened to Taj Patterson. So because Taj Patterson went, he obviously wanted justice on this and everything. So they started to prosecute this whole thing, right? And eventually, what happens is the NYPD in the showroom work together, and the showroom gives a list of guys who were probably there that night, beating up Taj. One of the names they offer is this guy, Mayor Herxkovic. Okay, this guy is as harmless as they come. Okay, and it's freaking obvious how harmless this guy is, right? But you know why they offered up Mayor? Because Mayor, they figured, no, there's no way in hell that he would ever get convicted. They were offering it up as a dummy suspect because they were just trying to protect their inner core who actually were involved, and they don't want them to get in trouble, so they're throwing up these scapegoats. And that's what's happening with this, and it's terrible. So this guy, Joel Ixkovic, is actually the big guy who is running this, and they have him on the video. I mean, there's plenty of reasons why NYPD could have picked him up and went, like, look, dude, it's pretty obvious. You're hearing the videos right here, kind of thing, right? But no, they don't. They go after Mayer. They try to trump up this DNA science, this weak DNA profile stuff that they had. That they deemed it was an inconclusive sample or an inconclusive test, but then they tried to use this thing called FST, forensic statistic tool, okay, and basically where it's not science, it's just a statistical tool, and somehow the judge and courts allow themselves to be fooled that a statistical tool is the same thing as science. So that's what this show here goes into. And it also goes into, like I said, the bigger picture of the corruption there in New York City. That's also very disturbing. So here we go. We'll go ahead and get on into it, and I'll see you guys a bit at the end.
A discipline in forensic science that was the gold standard for all others. When you have a DNA profile from a single individual, it can be very clear-cut. However, when you start talking about mixtures, it starts getting a little complicated. There's always going to be the problem of latent DNA on any surface that we're testing. For example, a doorknob. If someone robbed the house, they would have touched the doorknob. But how do you tell his DNA from all of the other people who've touched the doorknob? And that can be more problematic. How much weight can you put on that data? How much can you interpret with it? This is basically turning a rock-solid science into junk science. At that level, you just kind of go for it and you hope for the best. Let's say, okay, there's DNA on a shoe, but are there multiple contributors? When we're looking at a mixture, we're trying to pull out individuals that contributed to the mixture. It's kind of like listening to two songs at the same time. You have to detangle two songs apart from each other in order to identify each one. For example, song 1 is Journey, Don't Stop Believing. Don't stop believing. And song 2 might be Paradise by the Dashboard Light by Meatloaf. Now, mixtures aren't always 50-50. One person may be 90% of the total DNA, the other person could be 10%. Imagine that one song is playing 9 times the volume of the other. The loud song becomes very easy, but the minor song becomes much more difficult. Sometimes mixtures are 3 people. What happens with 4? Do you think you could identify 4 songs when they're all playing at different volumes? The same thing happens with DNA. In this particular case, there was something amiss with the DNA analysis that had been performed. I was asked to come into this case to review the DNA work that had been performed. I had been practicing forensic science for 26 years, but the judge said that they were excluding me as an expert because I did not have an advanced degree. Now, the state's expert had just graduated from college, and he was about 25 years old. I was very upset by it because Mr. Herskovic was denied the opportunity to have an expert speak at his trial on his behalf, someone who is going to expose all of the shortcomings in this case. Generally speaking, it takes about half a nanogram of DNA to get a profile. The DNA that you would find in about 25 cells. But when you start getting too much farther below that, you don't have enough copies of DNA to be able to get consistent, reliable results all the time. The amount they had recovered from the heel of the shoe was around 0.3 nanograms. At that point, they took one kind of decent sample and turned it into 3 shitty samples. And the results that you got were fairly chaotic. It through FST, it had the possibility of being able to include anybody on this planet.
So this is Taj's profile. This is your profile. So you've got 11 out of 15 locations that profile couldn't be. Different people, different profile.
Not me.
Not Taj.
And it's his shoe.
Correct. And that's how they use the FST and how they use the statistics. Mark Twain once famously said there are 3 types of lies: lies, damned lies, and statistics. Statistics can be manipulated depending on what it is that the analyst is looking for. So they can provide results that can be misleading, even if they're mathematically correct. So FST gives us 1 in 133. I bet if we tested any other member of the Hasidic community, you would get at least 1 in 133. Same results, different person, same illusion of science when there's really nothing but statistics. The first thing that I did after his conviction was I filed a motion so that he wouldn't be incarcerated while his appeal was pending. And right now, we're waiting for a decision from the appellate division. This evidence was very troubling from a legal perspective. It is one of the weakest cases that I have ever seen in my career. There were literally 5 cells worth of genetic material in the samples from that vial. They said, we're going to amplify that small amount of genetic material so that we can artificially generate enough material to test. And the problem is that the copy is not quite as good. Then you make a copy of the copy, and now you're building in additional defects into it, losing additional quality. Then you make a copy of the copy of the copy. Well, think of that happening in the realm of millions of times. That's what the OCME did in this case to generate artificially enough genetic material to allow it to run the test. What they got was something called a non-deducible mixture. A mixture from which no deduction can be made. Now, if we think about that logically, wouldn't that be the end of the case? But what the OCME did is they ran it through a statistical analysis and tried, nevertheless, to draw a deduction from it. That statistic is what they use to try to substitute for scientific evidence in this case. And that is what we based taking away this man's freedom. This is a person who has never been in trouble for anything. There was no eyewitness testimony putting Mayer at the scene. There were no cell sites showing that he was in that location at the time. But the really ironic thing about this case is that there actually was solid evidence that implicated other people in this assault. So, for example, there was surveillance video that showed 3 people in particular that initially gave chase to Taj Patterson. One of them, Joel Iskowitz, was the brother of the community leader of the Shomrim in Williamsburg, and he clearly was at the center of this assault.
I can't think of a better case to explore the corruption of money and race in New York City today.
We are stronger than this.
There's a press conference right where Taj Patterson was beaten, and every politician is there and said, we're going to get justice. Justice is blind. We don't care what race, what color. Everybody gets justice in this city. Whoever it is, we're going to find who did this.
This will not tear us apart because the fabric of our community is too strong for that. Thank you.
And then the camera pans around, And you see Yankee Itzkowitz standing right there, whose brother, Joel Itzkowitz, is the individual who was chasing Taj Patterson down on the street. You can find pictures of Yankee Itzkowitz with every elected official in the city. The fact that the city funds them, gives them equipment, they're completely interrelated with the NYPD. All the power to the Orthodox community that really support each other. But I hate the idea that money buys power in this city.
Hello.
The community was questioned, and eventually a number of names were given out by the Shomrim, and one of those names was Mayor Herskovich. They believed that since he wasn't there, he would never be convicted. Mayor was being painted as the ringleader of this assault.
Everybody knows who it is. The NYPD knows, the DA's office knows, and they telling me that they never investigated this guy. And this guy is enjoying it. When he walks on the street and he passes me by, he laughs in my face. Like, you're in trouble for something that I did.
Itzkowitz, or whatever his name is, the guy with the glasses and the Shomrim insignia. He was the main guy, like, in my face. That's how my eye became like this. Now I'm on the ground, and then they started, like, kicking me in the face. So it was a lot going on.
The case is very straightforward. There was an attack, we know who did it, and the people are not in jail. Whether the evidence is there on the sneak or not, I'm not a doctor, I don't know these things, but, you know, this is a grown-ass beard, like, with married kids, the whole. You're a grown-ass man. Someone in that group has to know this is wrong. What's wrong is wrong.
If Mayor Herskovich loses his appeal, then he will have to go to jail for 4 years. But I have faith. I do have faith that this unjust conviction will be remedied before Mayor has to do any time in prison. They find that the evidence, when properly weighed, did not establish the defendant's guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. You have actually been acquitted. It's as if you went to trial and were found not guilty. There is no retrial. It's done. You're innocent. It's a long road to get there, but it's over.
Yeah. It cost me a lot. It cost me lawyers, it cost me my health. It cost me, I don't know if people know, but it cost me on my marriage. And I have 2 little children at home. It's been a tough road, but I'm happy to start life from new.
Really?
She asked for a photo of you when you...
This picture? Like,
I like that picture of you.
super close up. I do like this picture.
You're always
I knew the case was strong in a sense, but I still knew that I wasn't gonna win. Does that make sense? Could have told you that from day one. Like, I knew that black gay guy, Hasidic Jewish man, that's just easy math. And now I'm blind in one eye for the rest of my life. There's no justice, there's no peace, there's nothing. I got nothing out of this but trauma. It's still an open wound, yeah. Yeah.
He's a victim twice because he didn't get justice, because they blamed everything on me. Why? Because they were looking for a scapegoat, and I wasn't. But he didn't get justice, and they know exactly who it was. They know everything. This city is, they call it the greatest city in the world. The best NYPD, the best police department and everything. They can't get who did it. They know exactly who did it. They don't have to come up with some flawed DNA.
When the judge hears DNA, hears some impressive sounding statistic, they take that as proof. They take it as unassailable proof. The problem is that the jury doesn't understand it, the judges don't understand it, and therefore they don't understand its limitations, and they don't understand how it can be misused. Ultimately, the Office of the Chief Medical Examiner decided to discontinue the forensic statistical tool.
OCME stands by the validity of their testing, because they know if they say, oops, what's going to happen to all the convictions or guilty pleas where that method was used. There's more to go with FST. We want a look back at old FST cases. It's been used to prosecute thousands and thousands of New Yorkers. But we know through experiences across the country, DNA evidence is far from perfect. Absolutely innocent people are being arrested and convicted because of DNA.
All right, so there we have it. That is the basic gist of episode 4 of Exhibit A on Netflix. Look, that story's terrible, right? I mean, first off, there's the attack on Taj Patterson. Sorry, I may have said Peterson earlier on, but it's Patterson. Taj Patterson. I mean, there's what happened to him. I mean, that's terrible, number one, and it's on its own. Okay? Then you have the fact that when he goes to the precinct in the morning, the case has already been closed. Like, people are already pulling strings trying to forget about Taj Patterson and the horrible thing that happened to him. I mean, that'd been a real kick in the teeth, right? If it were you or I or any, you know what I mean? If you got to the police station and saw that they were closing the case and saying F you, right? So there's that. Then you have the fact that NYPD works with the showroom or whatever, and then the showroom is the one that puts up the suspects and puts up the name Meyer Hershkovitz. You know? All because they knew it would be difficult to convict the 6 people that they suggested. And that way, the real troublemakers could get away scot-free without having to worry about it. Right? So then there's that. And why NYPD allowed that when, you know, the security cams and all the things, all that footage that they had gotten, you know, that it showed that it showed that certain people were definitely involved. And so how those people were able to escape suggests more NYPD corruption, because they're on the video, right? Yeah. So this one's a pretty wild one. I'm glad that Mayer didn't end up having to go do prison time for that jerk, Joel. Because, dude, I kind of felt a pang of anger when I heard Mayer, when I heard him saying about how sometimes he'll see that guy Joel, and Joel will he'll snicker at him or kind of be laughing at him or whatever, because he knows, that the mayor is essentially on the hook for what he did. Yeah. I imagine after this Netflix series, I think we're going to probably find things are probably turning around in that neighborhood over in New York. I would imagine that public opinion could shift considerably. Yeah? Anyway, all right. So that's it. Very interesting stuff, this one. You guys know when we've talked to Scooby in the past that there is the possibility of errors, especially back when DNA was in the further you go back in time, the less advanced DNA testing was. So as you go back in time, there were little things that could cause the wrong kind of readings or false readings. As you heard them describing in this show about how when you take 3 cells, which isn't really enough, and you take those and you start copying those 3 and then those 3 and those 3 and those, and you start copying copies like that, your errors creep in. So it's possible that they could give a false reading. You know what I mean? And that's what they're talking about in this. So anyway, interesting stuff. Hope you guys enjoyed it. If you haven't already, please hit subscribe.